Oh, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 48 of Monster. And in light of the craziness and mysteries getting revealed, things like that, I just was like, I'm gonna wear this sunshine shirt because surely nothing bad will happen if I'm wearing it. Poor Sook! I thought we were gonna get an update on Sook, but he's been moved to, it's like Mario and Luigi show up as Tenma and Grimmer, and it's like, sorry, Princess Sook is in another castle. So I'm like, at least in this sense, Sook being off screen is a good thing because it probably means he's okay, and he's probably not dead, maybe. So that's good to know. At least Sook can heal maybe on his own off screen, but I'm really excited for this episode. I have no clue where we're going. We just got introduced to yet more new characters as they were interviewing the man with the Czechoslovakian secret police, and they revealed that possibly Johan and Nina's mom was with this one guy, the man of the Rose Manor, whose name is like Franz. He has like a weird fake last name. I'm sure it's fake. And I'm like, is he Johan and Nina's dad? Who knows? There's lots of weirdness going on. And I'm like, okay. What do we do with this? So there's that. But I've got some comments I want to talk about before we dive into this episode. Sasha pointed out that Tenma is, hear me out, y'all. We had a little bit of Sasha was doing good, keeping me on the straight and narrow and helping me to sync up the timelines because, look, I don't really go back and rewatch these episodes because I've just got too much on my channel going on. And it's been like 40 weeks since I've seen the beginning of this series. It's been 47 weeks since I started this series. So y'all gonna have to cut me a break. I don't go look up any extra info because I don't want to be spoiled. And so trying to figure out exactly when stuff happens in the past, I'm like, So Sasha was nice to point out that Tenma is probably 37. So if Grimmer's 44, they are an acceptable, shippable age. I'm like, great. Tenma's older than I am at this point, which is great. Which I'm totally fine with. And then the idea is that Tenma's only been on... What confused me in the last episode as I was in the discussion was that I was thinking it's been 10 years since Tenma saved Johan as a child. But Johan's been behind the scenes doing all this other stuff. It's only been a year or so since Tenma's been on the run for the murders of the doctors and everything else. That's what it is. And I'm like, okay. So that's all cleared up. So now I know if I misspeak, it's fine. Y'all know I've been doing this week to week for almost a year now. It's fine. But yes, I am really excited about that. So thank you, Sasha, for clearing things up for me. I appreciate it. Rack6919 talked about how Grimmer reads as someone who could have a dissociative identity disorder, which I'm actually okay with that because they talked about, I like their comment because they talked about how Grimmer shows a lot of signs of DID, which is it happened when he was a child, he doesn't recall things, he slips in and out of consciousness, it's an alter, so Mr. Steiner could very well be an alter that he has. I'm not usually one for the DID trope in anime and manga because a lot of times, and this is with fiction in general, a lot of times DID individuals in media are portrayed as villains. And I'm not really crazy about that because if you know someone with DID or you've known someone that has a disorder, then it's like portraying them as a villain and villainizing it. I find a lot of problems with that personally, and I'm not usually a fan of it. However, I will say this. I do like the idea of Grimmer being a character with it because Grimmer could be a positive representation of it. A character that in any situation it could be villainized, but because Grimmer's so kind and compassionate and such an amazing character, he actually brings forth this positive representation. So I'm like, yes, cool. Grimmer's somebody that despite the trauma that's happened in his life, despite the darkness in it, he's trying to overcome it. It's just he has this alter of Mr. Steiner, the Magnificent, that comes out under certain circumstances. So yeah, and usually those circumstances are triggered by an extremely traumatic, violent event, which tracks with his childhood at Kinderheim. So yeah, I fully agree that I think that Grimmer could have DID. What I liked about Rack's comment was that Johan does not have DID. Because the telltale signs is that they seem conscious of all of their actions there are not alters with Johan. Nina takes it I like the way they put it. Nina takes it way too literally, and she just assumes that it's something like an alternate personality. But no, Johan is fully conscious whenever he's doing any of his actions. He is fully engaged, and it's Johan doing it. But what I liked they said was that it almost seems like instead of DID, Johan is depersonalizing himself. He says phrases like, I don't exist, and I'm not even here. He's trying to remove himself from his actions, but he's not creating an alternate personality doing them. He's just removing himself from the equation. And even I like they point out in the comment that even when we're listening to the tape, the names that Johan gives himself are all names from the storybook, but they're not his actual name. So I really like that. I like the idea of Grimmer could have DID as a character, but Johan is more depersonalizing and trying to make himself not a real person. I like that. So thank you, Rack, for that comment. Sunray pointed out Carl Jung's map of the soul theory, which I'm a big fan of, and the idea of Johan and Grimmer with the shadow and monster inside of them and how they handle that. And I liked this comment about how Johan allows the shadow to become dominant. He allows the shadow and the monster to take over a lot of times, and that's where all these crimes tend to happen. Whereas Grimmer is more of a monitoring system and takes measures to prevent the shadow from overtaking him. Only in the cases of extreme violence and self-defense does Steiner come out. So I thought that was really good. I liked that being pointed out. And then finally, Omaru0128 noted that Sook and Grimmer both being influenced by cartoons as kids. I thought that was really fascinating that yes, you have Sook, who is influenced by all the detective shows when he was a kid, and that influenced him to become a detective, and then you have Grimmer, who was influenced by the cartoon shows as a kid and created the alter of Steiner. So that's really interesting. I like it. Cheers. So I thought those comments were really, really good. Thank you all so much. I want to give a very quick shout out over to Patreon, to our philanthropy tier, to thank them for all of your support and kindness as I watch Monster, because it's really appreciated. You guys help me buy the manga, and then Anthony helps give me the episodes, which is super kind of him, so thank you, Anthony. But also thank you to these philanthropy tier patrons who go above and beyond each month and are so generous and kind. Y'all, I cannot appreciate it enough. But special thanks to Tyrone, to Anime Annie, to Eric, to Sunspots, to Translucent Men, to Anna, to Goob, to Matthew Palfinier, to Ashy Gots No Bitches, to Trails, as well as Nameless Monster, Shimoyama, Kiri, Be Happy, Alex Cornejo, Edgar, and Dana. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, Chick chick. I'm super excited, y'all. There's so much new information. We seem to have a lot of different routes we could go on now that we know this. The question is, what is Grimmer and Timma going to do? What is Nina going to do? Dieter's there in Prague. Johan's there. We have all this new information. What are we going to do with it? And we kind of left on a tense note with Nina and her remembering things. Who do we think the little girl is? Johan? I went to a big spiel about that at the end of the last video. I think that little girl is Johan, and he's been dressed up like a girl for a long time. His stint as Nina is not the first time this has happened. But we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? So, in any case, we're going to start Monster episode 48, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Lunge is in Prague. I've honestly been waiting for Lunge to get here for like 6 episodes. And I was thinking about that. I was like, man, the whole library burning was like 10 episodes ago. Which feels like a long time ago, but actually in the reality of the series, it's not been that long ago, which just shows you how much has happened in a short period of time. Insanity. Insanity, y'all. I'm so floored. I can't believe it. I'm absolutely floored, but what can we do? What can we do? So yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. We got confirmation on some things, and then some things you're just never going to find out because Johan recorded over it. I was like, you son of a bitch, how dare you? What's very interesting is that we don't know about the documents. The documents weren't brought up that were left behind, just the cassette tape. And it's like, what's interesting is that Johan let them re-listen to part of it. He did. He let them re-listen to part of it, just enough to mention that he just wants his sister, Anna. He only wants her so he can remember her. If he remembers only one thing, it's just her. Which is interesting and gives his character motivation for why he's wanted to stay with her this whole time. And surprisingly, gives a lot of motivation of why he's wanted her to come back into his life. He's like, I want my sister because of X, Y, and Z. Now, the thing about it is, why didn't he end up going with her from back with the one family? Why did the Fortners end up with just her and not both of them together? Why did he separate himself if he wanted to come? Was he trying to get things in order and then come back and find her later? Like, what was the deal? Because it makes sense why all he wanted to do was have her, and then once he got out of Kinderheim, he got her, and then they took off together and ended up with the Lieberts. That all makes sense. But the fact of how he got separated from her after they got out of the hospital is interesting. And you can make the argument that he did it so they wouldn't be found, because it's really easy to point out twins. Twins aren't a common occurrence. So especially when you're looking for a set of blonde twins and they got adopted together, that'd be pretty suspicious. But if they got separated, then it wouldn't be so obvious. So there's bits and pieces we don't have fully explained to us, but that's okay. And I think if I think back, wasn't Johan with them for a while, but then he got separated? I can't remember if the Fortners had him with them for a while, but then, yeah, that's right. He was actually with them for a while, but then he was acting up, so he went to a different household. Right? But Nina doesn't remember that, right? I think that was the case when they first adopted them. He was acting wonky, and so they got rid of him and took him to another house and then just kept Nina. And maybe he wanted to get separated. There's still parts and pieces we don't know for sure, but this episode is very interesting. This one's very interesting. So we go back to Nina, and she's telling Dieter that she doesn't understand. She doesn't understand why she is remembering seeing herself at the doorway. And again, I still think Johan is the kid, is the little girl with the book. I still think it's him. I do. Right? But we have the pen name. We have Franz Bonaparte. Franz Bonaparte. We're gonna do the man in the Rose Mansion and all of his aliases. What's so fascinating is, again, we're talking about the theory of names and the importance they have. And for him, these pen names mean nothing, probably. But it's this that is important, the man in the Rose Mansion, who I think he is the father of the twins. I fully believe that he's the father of the twins, and he's been with their mom. Because, I mean, for him to be sketching her pregnant, for him to sketch the babies, that means he's been around them all the time. That means he made the book for them. And if you told me that she got involved with this guy, and he's some guy with the Czechoslovakian police that's some kind of psychotherapist, psychoanalyst that's also with Kinderheim, would not be surprised. And he was wanting to do an experiment on Johan, would not be surprised. And we're going to talk about the storybook now that we know that this man has had this big involvement, right? But the idea that he's made this book and everything. What's so fascinating is this story is still trying to confuse us, right? It's still trying to make us question whether it's Nina or Anna. This time around, the boots weren't quite knee-high like Nina's are. And now that we know that Johan has been cross-dressing as Anna, now that we know that, the thing about it is that we can distinguish him from her a lot easier, because Nina is not quiet. You know, she's not quiet. She comes in, she's very like kind of scattered a little bit, and she gets more nervous easier, and Johan maintains this sense of calm. So the moment they went in to see Jan's or Suk's mother and had that calm appearance, I'm like, oh, that's Johan for sure. Absolutely, right? A very peculiar picture book. And it was me in the memory. So we'll talk about that. We'll get past this OP and go into it. So, where is the mom? And that's when Johan goes to see her. And Johan has Johan is surprisingly very calm, very nice. like talks to her about story time and things like that. And then figures out the cassette tape. That look on Johan's face, though, whenever she tells him, oh yeah, my dear son Sook, he brought me this gift here. It's right here. That's right. Because Johan has such gentle eyes. This is fun. And he's like, oh, the cassette tape, it's right here. And Johan's like, is it now? God, that look Johan gives is like cat eats the canary, like taking candy from a baby. It was all too easy. So, something to note about Johan is the idea of his gentle eyes. The gentle eyes and the fact that he found the tape and only recorded over part after he found what he needed, right? And whatever that is, he found what he needed. Now, the thing that's so frustrating is we don't know exactly what was on the tape that was not revealed that helped Johan find out something. That's so frustrating. It's like, damn it, no. It's like, I just want to know what else he found out. Like, why? I want to go back to that tape when we get to it with Grimmer, and the scariest thing is him being without his sister. The thing about it is, he talks about the scariest thing. I guess we'll put that up here. The scariest thing is forgetting his sister. The scariest thing for me is the idea that these kids were self-aware that they were losing their memories. That's the terrifying thing. That while he was drugged and being interrogated, he admitted that he was afraid because he knew he was forgetting things slowly but surely. That is terrifying. And I think that's why he's able to kind of connect with Sook's mom, because she's slowly losing her memory. She's like shows signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, that she's losing her memory. So again, it's the idea of him connecting with Sook's mom and this concept of memory. And the idea that after she connects, she felt like she woke up. What the fudge? Felt like she woke up for a day. How Johan is able to like pull off this Jesus Christ superstar thing and make them remember and have lucidity for a certain period of time. I'm like, is it methods that he learned from his father? I'm going to put father in quotation marks because we don't know if it's it for true, but I'm thinking that it is. Are these methods he learned from the man in the red rose mansion that are just able to like make people remember things? Like, what is going on? It's so fascinating, right? But the idea of him losing his memories and being self-aware of it is absolutely terrifying. So meanwhile, we have our boyfriends, Grimmer and Tinma, going there to go check out the tape with their matching duffel bags and matchy-matchy outfits. And they tell the Czechoslovakian police man, the supervisor in charge, they're going to get the thing, so he'll keep his agreement. The one thing that I'm very happy about is that they did find the tape, and so far it seems like the man's keeping his agreement. Because what I was afraid of is that they were going to go in there and Johan was going to have taken the tape, and then they were going to be screwed. Which again, the question is, with the tape, why not take it? Why not take it? Why are you leading them on this goose chase? Again, I do feel like Johan does feel for Grimmer somewhat and sympathizes with him, so he doesn't want Grimmer to get caught. And maybe it's a way for Grimmer and Tinma to investigate more and help Johan find out. Because technically, maybe Johan was feeling nice because Grimmer and Tinma led Johan to the tape, so maybe he was feeling generous today. He was like, you know what? You helped me find out about myself. You helped me find out this piece of information I've been looking at for a long time. I'm going to reward you guys by giving you the tape so you can get your agreement with Sook. Look at that. And maybe he felt sorry for the mom, right? The thing that's so fascinating about this is that everybody's like, oh my God, Johan is extremely dangerous, but yet Johan is picky choosy on who he kills. Like, he doesn't do anything to Sook's mom. He doesn't do anything to Sook. It's almost like Johan just passes this random judgment. And it's so frustrating because there are times where I'm like, well, Johan technically hasn't done anything wrong. And then I'm like, wait, he shot all those guys. And then I'm like, but wait, they were threatening Grimmer. But I'm like, wait, what about the parents? What about the foster parents? What's happening? What about the Fortners? And I'm like, Johan, why frustrating because there is a part of me that wants to show Johan is very gray as an individual, and I think that's what the show is trying to do. But it's also frustrating because he's so dangerous, and you just don't know what his end goal is, and you're like, what's your end game? That it's you can't trust him, right? You can't trust him. And he's like, what is Jan doing? He's like, take me to the hospital. He's in trouble. My head feels very clear. The person who was just here woke me up. Let me see Jan. And they're like, what the fudge? And I'm glad that the Czechoslovakian police guy takes her to the hospital. I'm glad he's there to be like, okay, let's go. But the whole thing of her waking up and Johan doing it, it's the weirdest thing, right? It's the weirdest thing. Because he kind of does that with Schubert. He kind of does that with a lot of people that he interacts with. And maybe it's the idea that he can wake up these people. You know, she doesn't seem to have done anything bad in her life, so maybe waking up for her is a good thing, whereas for people that have committed crimes, it's a bad thing. I don't know. I hate that the moment Sook wakes up, the first thing he sees is Grimmer's fake smile, just to remind us that that smile is fake, and Grimmer's been pretty concerned about him. And then I was expecting Sook to have a pretty dramatic reaction to his mom showing up, but he's totally fine with it. I'm glad he's okay. And they all bring him here, and she tells a story about when he sprained his ankle, and she says, don't let me forget my child. And again, that callback to memory and the idea of the one thing you don't want to forget. The scariest thing, what this episode's titled out of, the scariest thing in regards to this episode is the idea of forgetting the people you care about. That's the scariest thing. And so for us, in this aspect, we have Grimmer. And Grimmer, the sad thing about him is we don't know about his son. His son was brought up. Remember, his son is dead. But we don't know. I'm wondering if Grimmer doesn't even remember his son. You know? I'm wondering if that's even a thing. We'll have to see there. For Tinma, the scariest thing is possibly remembering himself as a doctor, because he seems to be getting further and further from that. It's like he's almost brainwashing himself in a sense. Lunge is interesting because Lunge, I'm not exactly sure what he's remembering or forgetting. We're going to talk about Lunge here in a little bit. And then for Sook, I guess maybe it's his purpose as a detective. Try not to forget about that. But for the mom and for, I guess Grimmer can get involved in this too. And for Johan, it's the idea of family and forgetting the people that we're closest to, which is terrifying. That the concept of forgetting people around you, forgetting things, is a very terrifying concept. And this episode points out just how scary it can be. And so Johan didn't record over the munch munch gulp gulp parts, the munch munch nom nom. He wanted them to hear that creepy ass voice say that in full detail. I'm like, awesome. And he's like, you should listen. I like that the Czechoslovakian police supervisor was like, I don't want to hear any more. And Grimmer was like, no, you're going to hear the rest because you need to understand what happened to your nephew, because this is basically the process. They just had Johan drugged to explain it. And so he's like, this is what they did to your nephew. What I'm most afraid of is that I'll forget Anna. All these strange experiments, my memories are disappearing, which is terrifying. Don't let me forget Anna. In this whole world, there's only Anna and me. Which is going to be very interesting, because then we have the idea about what about the mom and what about the dad. So I'm assuming by this point that Johan understands his mother is dead, and maybe his dad is dead to him, and he doesn't, want to acknowledge him. It's just him and Anna against the world. That's very popular. And he says, please. And then Johan says, that's as far as I'll let you listen. That moment is so creepy and well done. It's like, oh, he's not going to let you listen any further. And Tim is like, yeah, it's Johan. So by now they should understand. They're like, oh, the person that was with Sook's mom is this guy. So I would like to think that Tinma and Grimmer and the policeman and the Czechoslovakian police supervisor I have a feeling, and I forget his name, but I have a feeling that they're going to put two and two together that Johan is dressing as a woman. You would think they would put that together, because if they've determined that Johan was with Sook's mom, but the nurse said it was a pretty woman, they would put two and two together. Now, of course, the scary part is, again, I've said this the last several episodes, I'm worried about Nina, because I'm worried about them, mistaking Nina for Johan. And I'm like, just yank her hair once and you'll realize it's her hair and it's her. But my fear is later on in this story, it's going to get to the point where she is targeted, and I'm worried Nina's going to end up getting killed because they think that she's Johan. And then we're going to find out that it's not Johan, that it was her all along. That's my fear. My fear is that she's going to get targeted, and that's going to be that. That is my fear. And if she dies, then what does Johan have left to lose, you know? That's the scary thing. I feel like Tenma, which is so weird, you'd think Tenma keeping Nina safe would get him in Johan's good graces, but here we are. And if Nina ends up getting hurt, what is Johan going to do about it? What's going to happen? Because Tenma, I think, would keep her safe regardless. But if they realize that they could use her as as bait to get Johan to come out, like Baby's group and the others have done, then what do we do with that? So I'm just worried for Nina, because I feel like I need them to figure out how to tell that it's Johan and not her, so that she's not going to be put in danger, right? So anyway, but that's halfway through the episode. The other half of this episode is talking about Lunge taking off to go on vacation in Prague. Who knew, right? Who knew? And I like seeing things through the eyes of Lunge and seeing what he takes note of and what he pays attention to. We've talked about this in other episodes, but I definitely believe that Lunge he's neurodivergent. I believe he is on a spectrum of neurodivergency, which makes his character so fascinating to watch, because you're just trying to figure out what makes him tick. And for example, we'll put Lunge up here. For example, the idea that when he sits down at the bar and the man's like, oh, what would you like to drink? He says coffee, and he's like, no, I'm on vacation, a beer. That is like a neurodivergent thing of, I have to conform to this environment, so I need to do this X factor. And it's like, most people would reason that out and think about that before saying it. But for Lunge, the gears are turning, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It makes his character intriguing to watch, because you're constantly wondering what he's going to do next. But then he sits there and asks what brand the beer is, and they're like, oh, it's the local beer. And he takes note of it, and then he's like, why do I need to take note of it? So I find it interesting that he's questioning what he takes note of and what he doesn't take note of, right? I find that interesting. And then his response to the beer was like, like, it's fine. I guess it's nothing special, right? And so then we come back to the police. And I forget, we've been following the secret police supervisor for the last couple episodes. I forget he has nothing to do with the current Prague police. He is a total separate entity, and they're working undercover with Tenma and Grimmer, not with these guys. And this chief is just like, I'm at the end of my rope, you guys are incompetent, whatever. And then Lunge comes in. What's fascinating is that Lunge, they were at last year's Interpol conference together. Well, just looky here, old buddies. So at the Interpol conference. So Lunge was there giving a talk, which is fascinating. Could Lunge be a product of Kinderheim? Could Lunge be a product of Kinderheim? I mean, as far as him not understanding how to love something, he checks the box off for that. He doesn't seem to understand how to socially engage with his wife or daughter, even when he tries. Are we just going to think that every character in the story that has a difficulty having empathy or compassion for others is going to be from Kinderheim? But what if he was? What if Lunge was from Kinderheim? He would kind of be, would he be the right age? Is he from the first graduating class of Kinderheim? Possibly. But he gives that talk about collecting objective data. And the thing about it is, the police chief at Prague takes him completely seriously. Treats him completely seriously. His own like workforce he works with on a daily basis doesn't take him seriously. They don't treat him seriously at all. They're just like, oh, there's Lunge, right? But this guy does. This guy takes him very seriously. He's like, yes, your speech was interesting. He's like, I didn't know you were on vacation. Napella, Commissioner Napella. He's like, your hands are full, it seems. He's like, yes. I'm just amazed this guy has like full respect for Lunge. It's fascinating. He's like, I'm trying to find out about this connection in these stories. And Lunge is reminded that this story with Sook is very similar to the story with Tenma. Like, and then it starts to get a little too similar, and he kind of goes, oh, the poison candies, you say. A blonde girl, you say. Like, so we find out he's there to get the storybook. He is there to collect a copy of the kids' book that we've been connecting over here with the man in the Rose Mansion. I also like that the Prague police officer Napala, he takes Lunge's typing totally seriously as the objective collection of data, which is so funny. And Lunge even kind of like flinches when he says that, because all I can think of is Rudy telling him it's not objective, it's subjective, and you're just, bullshitting that it is. And he's like, But yeah, so he takes all that and he gives him like all the details about everything. And then he's talking about the case. And he's like, we don't have any proof. And then Lunge's like, well, it sounds like Sook's the one that's to blame. All the evidence points to him. He's like, I've seen a very specific and similar case. He's like, and then he talks about, he's like, oh, you said something about this at the lecture. Using the data. He said, using the data you objectively collect, by using that data, you can conduct the investigation from a completely subjective perspective, that of the killer. So that's interesting. So Rudy called him out saying that his data collection was subjective and that it wasn't accurate, but he said in his lecture it is an objective collection, and using the objective knowledge gained, you can do a subjective impersonation of the killer. So he's like, I've collected this data objectively, and now I'm using it to make a subjective reference to the killer, but it's one we can use to track them down. What's fascinating about all of that, is during the conversation with the two friends of Sook, who are like, our friend's innocent, he didn't mean any harm, Lunge's hand never moves an inch. Like at that table, his hand is completely still. He is not taking into account or objectively collecting any data from these two guys until they mention the blonde woman, and then Lunge starts going, oh, really? That's connected. So go ahead. So it is subjective, right? It is. Even though he tries to like out it as, oh, no, it's just collecting data for a subjective imitation. No, yeah, right? And so he found the copy and he asked them to translate it. And he's like, oh, I didn't know you had such hobbies as collecting children's books. It's like, well, sure. And when he said, is it for like your kid or grandkid? And he said something like that. Which means, going back to him, he took on this case instead of seeing his grandkid. So it's like he can't go see his grandkid until he solves this case. Like, that's just the way that his brain works. And it's like, Lunge, what do we do with you, right? You could say that. But yeah, he doesn't start typing anything until they talk about the pretty friend. So yeah, so then we have all the books by the guy with the pen name, right? And so we get one of his names. He says Emil Scherb is another name. So Emil Scherbe is one. The Monster Without a Name is one book. It's one of our publications. It was published during the old regime. So that would have been during the previous company president's time. He's like, so I don't really have a copy of it. And he's like, well, it's probably a pen name. It's actually one. There were other pen names as well. Several. Something Bonaparte. So Franz Bonaparte is a pen name. Yakov Virobek. Okay. So we have Yakov Verobek was a nickname as well. That doesn't sound very familiar. And then Klaus Poppy. Klaus Poppy sounds like a definite pen name. For sure. And that's the one that Lunge finds the books, the notepads with all the illustrations in them. Rough sketches. Can I open it and look through it? And they're like, sure, we don't care. And so then he looks through it, and we see like the little sketches of the witch and the goat. And he's sitting there looking through all the sketches to see what he sees there. And then that's when he sees the sketch of the mom. And she looks like Johan and Nina, except she looks not happy. She's pregnant with both of them, and she doesn't look happy. But she looks a lot like Nina and Johan, right? So that guy in the Rose Mansion could definitely be the husband. It's going back to the OP, the sketches. Yes. And he's like a pregnant woman. And then the next page is the babies, the twins. Yep, children were born. And then the next page is the little girl with the flowers. And then on the very next page, there's Johan the boy. But they have the same hair. They have the same bangs, right? The same smiles, the same bangs. Yep, the same face. Yep. So is that Nina or is it... And I'm like, Lunge. So, it's creepy. The drawings of the twins are so creepy. But yeah, like what author, unless he was like with her at the time, and maybe he's not the biological dad. Maybe the man in the Rose Manor is not the biological dad. Maybe he's just somebody that was a friend of hers. Maybe she worked with him in the secret police. Maybe he's not the father. Maybe he just kind of took her in. But I'm like, that begs the question about the book, right? So we went back through this, and Lunge is like, something's been bothering me. What was on the last page? Even though he now had a name, there was no one left to call him by his name. Johan. It is a wonderful name. And Lunge is like, Johan, what a curious picture book. He's like, how about having dinner with me sometime? And then he says, I don't need the beer. I want coffee. He's like, I'm on the case now. Now I'm on the case. Yes, it'll be a long vacation. So the creepy thing about the book is if we know that this guy is connected to the mom, connected to the kids, has known them since kids, what is the point of the book? Because it's almost, suggesting the plot of it is that there are two monsters that have no names, which is clearly a tie to the twins. And then one of the monsters, he inhabits a sickly boy, right? So it could definitely be that Johan was a really sickly kid and the dad wrote about it, or the man in the Rose Mansion. I want to call him their dad because I think it is. But the man in the Rose Mansion, we'll just say Franz, that he wrote about the sickly boy. And the idea, one of the things that was said in Nina's flashback is you can become anything. So if it was a sickly boy and then dressing, because at the very end, dressing as a girl, at the very end, Johan's monster eats the one that's Anna, right? And it eating the monster, Johan's monster eating Anna at the very end shows him becoming her, right? Him becoming the girl, which is kind of like what he's doing right now when he dresses in drag. So it is possible that it's very possible that this man and their mom, the twins' mom, decided to keep them alive. And the only thing they could think of would be, okay, to keep Johan alive, he's a sickly boy. We're going to pass it off that he died and only the girl is left. We're going to dress him up as the girl, and that's how we're going to get them across the border. And then something went wrong. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Maybe they were trying to keep him away from Kinderheim. And to do that, he had to dress him as the sister to get them across the border that nobody would suspect. But it is creepy that this man has been with those kids since they were babies and then wrote a storybook about them as two monsters, and in the end, Johan's monster eats Anna's, and then is all alone. So that's just weird to me. Like, why would we do that? And I feel like the part about the story of the Man in the Rose Manor, or the Rose Mansion, I feel like this part of the story is going to be focused on next. We're going to focus on who this man was, what the deal is. The big question is he still alive? Is this guy still alive? I don't know. And is Johan looking for him? Is Johan looking for his parents? Is the mom dead? I feel like it's funny. I thought that the mom was alive and well and saving Grimmer way back in episode whatever. But I wonder, or episode 43, I guess that's what it was. I wonder if the mom is dead now, but the man that wrote the book is still alive, and Johan's trying to find him and be like, what did you do to us? What is this? Why are you doing this to me and my sister? What is happening? What is going on? I feel like that's maybe one of Johan's missions, is to find out who this man is and where he's at. But to do that, he needed to backtrack and learn about himself. He needed to listen to the tape and everything. And maybe what he found out on the tape is where the man is and all this extra information that we, the audience, are not going to find out until Tenma and Grimmer find out later on in this series. I think that's the case. But what's curious is I want to know, is Lunge going to meet Johan as Nina? Is Lunge going to meet Johan? What is Lunge going to do when he does meet Johan? That's the interesting thing. What is he going to do when he does meet with Johan? That has been one of the big questions I've had so long in this series, is if Lunge actually meets Johan, what do we do with that? What is going to happen? And if Lunge ends up being like from Kinderheim and Johan knows that, I don't know. But this episode felt very much like a setup episode. It felt like it was on the heels of the last episode, but it's setting up for 49. So it's giving us all these details, and it's bridging us from one story into the new story. So I feel like we're about to start the new arc with the next episode. Now that we know Lunge's in Prague, we know that Grimmer and Tenma are still on the run. I'm curious too, now that they've done the tape and they've talked to Sook, Sook I think is going to stay at the hospital and heal up. I think Sook is going to be out of commission from this story for a while now. But like, what are Grimmer and Tenma going to do? Are they going to convince the Czechoslovakian secret police that they're like, hey, we need some immunity so we can go try to find this guy, Johan, and figure out what's going on? Are they going to run into Nina and Dieter? What are they going to do if they do? Is Johan going to run into Dieter and Nina? What's going to happen if they do that? Like, what? There are a lot of possibilities now that everybody's in Prague. And we still need to find out who this guy is. And what's the deal with this stupid storybook? The bitch with no name! What's the deal with the storybook? And is it a brainwashing tool? What's happening? So yeah. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But this episode definitely setting some stuff up. And I'm very curious to see what's going to happen next week when we find out where we go to now. Because it's like, yeah, it's where's the story going to go? We'll have to see. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with episode 49 of Monster.